housing is not some just like homogenous blob. People like me always make that mistake because frankly, it's just easier. You see the housing price chart for Canada and you're like, it's going up, it's going down, whatever. But housing is extremely local. Depending on where you live, there might be massive changes in housing and house prices. And so, in Quebec City, house prices have been going up. In Montreal, they've been relatively flat. In Windsor and, Brampton or whatever it is, they've cratered. Montreal hasn't had the dog crate condo boom that, let's say, Toronto has. I think there's just more pain to come in some of these pinch points.
Welcome to the Tom Storey Show with Steve Karrasch and Tom Storey, where we discuss everything real estate or whatever else is on our minds.
Tom, I'm just going to warn you right now. My router's been giving me flashing different lights this morning, so if That's okay. Cut out, I'll come back.
Our audience has already seen I have a new co-host today that they're probably going to like better, so we're totally fine.
Oh, you're recording? Okay. Good.
I'm recording, yeah. Welcome back, everybody, to the Tom Storey Show. I appreciate you guys being here. This week's guest is Richard Diaz from IceCap. Let me try that again. Not a good start, Rich.
Not a good start.
And
Keith will not appreciate that.
And the co-host of the Loonie Hour. What's great? This is coming out a little bit after we record it, Rich. But what's great about October is the first hockey game of the season. You get to watch the Leafs just beat down on the Habs. So I'm just wondering, Are you prepared for that before we get into everything else we're going to talk about today?
I am, buddy. I have drank the Kool-Aid. We are on the rebuild. We got Demidov. We've got good players. It's not about this year. We're looking for sustained success, sustainable success. And so, you can have this year and your an inevitable demise in the first round of the playoffs. And but I'm looking ahead. But also, just for the record, it's IceCap Asset Management.
I'm sorry about that. Yes.
Okay.
IceCap Asset Management. We don't edit on this show, so we're just going to leave it.
No, neither do we. So it's okay.
All right. I want to know. I'm hoping what you can tell me is, obviously, most people that are watching our show probably know your show, one of the most successful, if not the most successful, Canadian economics podcast out there. But Richard, what do you do? Like, what is your actual day? What do you do for work?
Sure, that's great. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to sort of to plug all my stuff. So I'm a global strategist and hopefully soon to be portfolio manager for IceCap Asset Management. We manage money for families all across Canada and different parts of the world. We are exactly what it says on the tin. So we are a relatively probably conservative asset manager. We pride ourselves on sort of thoughtful capital allocation strategies and an emphasis on risk. And that's what we do. We and capital preservation, we're, and so that's sort of my day job. Obviously I'm a co-host of the Loonie Hour, which is Canada's, I don't know if it's the most successful, but it's definitely
one of
most fun. I can tell you it's the most fun. And then I as part of my role with IceCap, obviously I provide strategy and research. There's some client-facing stuff. There's all the operational parts around being an asset manager. There's the regulatory and compliance requirements, which we love. And of course, and then also the newest thing I've done, or actually it's not that new anymore. I've done it for about a year. And that's called the IceCap Canadian Market Wrap. And that's where every week I do a sort of 6 to 10 minute vignette on different economic and economic and sometimes financial market data, what's going on. And because I just don't think there's enough Canadian content. I've thought so for a long time before it became cool. And so I just tried to just put stuff out there as the best way I possibly can. And I don't, without any fear or favor. And I'm really committed to charts and data. And God help you, I sometimes even change my mind. And so, or admit that I'm wrong, which I often am. And that's what I've been doing more recently. Yeah.
Are you enjoying that, doing your own videos?
No, it's listen, what I don't like is the deadline and the pressure, because you have to deliver every single week. Keith would not approve. Keith is a great boss, and I'm really proud to work for a firm that I can believe in. I believe in what we do. I believe in how we treat our clients. I believe in our philosophy and the way we manage money. But cranking out a fresh new video every single week and not being able to basically take any days off, to just be super consistent is very difficult. And also the standard I hold for myself is basically extremely, extremely high. I cut my teeth in London working for a hedge fund as the global strategist there. And then I worked for a private Swiss bank. And when you're working in the institutional world, you just can't screw up your charts. You cannot have any typos. You cannot, there's a certain level of rigor, I would say, that you just have to have. And even though, not that many people watch it, that's a standard I hold for myself. And also I want to be interesting. And I think that's the other part that's very difficult. But the freedom to do whatever I want and say whatever I want, I guess that's really, really awesome.
Interesting. Well, if you ever want to get into real estate, you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. Spelling, none of it. Data being correct, you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. And you can crank out 3-4 videos a week like Tom and I do.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to give you a little bit of backstory here. So I was like, Tom, we've had Steve on before, and I'm like, we got to have this Richard guy on. And Tom says to me, he actually said to me, he's like, well, one, he's not in real estate, so that might not fit our audience. And he's like, but I don't really understand what he does. And Tom actually said this to me humbly, almost. He's almost like, I don't feel like I'm smart enough to ask him questions.
No, I wouldn't say that at all.
I said, Tom, don't worry. I got this, right? I'll figure this out. So I spent a lot of time trying to formulate my first question for you about
this is a big one. Get ready.
Echo.
Yes, I think we can win the Stanley Cup this year. I genuinely believe if we get a little luck and our goalie plays well,
You're talking about the Leafs, right?
Do it. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you. Please.
No, but it boils down to this one question, and I was like, okay, we need to ask something intelligent for our audience, and we need to bring it down to our level from the high levels of the audience that you have on the Loonie Hour. So I think I've figured out the perfect question to ask you that will kind of bring it all together and introduce you to our audience. And that is specifically, as Canadians, how fucked are we?
I mean, short term or long term?
Let's go. Let you start wherever you want to start.
I think short term, we're proper fucked. And I don't think any of the bloviating from Ottawa can really stop the trend that we're on. Unemployment will rise, growth will be weak, there will be issues in credit markets, and real estate will continue to have what I think is a very healthy correction. Productivity will continue to be bad, investment will continue to decline. There will be more pain. I think long term, I think we have every single thing that we need to be successful as a country. We just need the government to let us thrive. And I don't mean just the federal government, but also provincially and probably locally if you're at a real estate level. But yeah, long term, I think we're going to be totally fine. I think we are facing the end of a couple of different cycles. And that's always difficult for people who are on the wrong side of that trade. And the best thing those people can do is just get out of the way. Of course, people never do. You're always going to hold on to, people always hold on to losing trades. And I think that that's what we're watching right now.
So
should I go on? I mean, I can.
Well, in the next 2 years for the proper fucked category, like long term, I would agree. I think, Canada's a great place, but in the next 2 years, it's just because so many people are going to hold on and not get out of the way that we're going to be in that situation?
Yeah, I just think that philosophically, the people who have been leading our country, as well-intentioned as they were and are, I think that they've just made some really big mistakes, and they are seeing the fruit of their disastrous decisions. I mean, there's just let's just rattle off some really quick stuff. So industrial policy has been a complete shambles. The emphasis, the lack of emphasis on natural resources is one thing, which is something I've gone on and on about, specifically oil and gas, trying to destroy that industry when it's the most important export we have, and basically what supports and sustains our standard of living. The insistence on sort of making it difficult for people to mine and extract natural resources and then process those natural resources here. So that's that piece. Then there's the increase in manufacturing red tape across the board. So that, and then, on and on it goes. So that's industrial policy. There's immigration has been a complete and utter disaster. And I think people just don't understand the degree to which that was such an important and enormous mistake with respect to how countries are run. And I always have to qualify this because I feel like I have to, and I shouldn't need to, but as the son of two very poor, uneducated immigrants who came to Canada, it's not like we just screwed that up so badly. Like, we went from an immigration system that was the envy of the world. Literally, if you just type in Google Canada immigration 2015, there's like tons and tons and tons of articles literally using the word envy and saying, like, from The Guardian or from, Der Spiegel, which is a German newspaper, or, from Figaro, which is a French finance newspaper, or the FT, saying, how can the rest of Europe emulate what's going on in Canada? And, 10 years later, they basically destroyed it. They lowered standards. They allowed family unification, which of course was abused, and imported lots of old people who don't work and don't contribute and don't pay taxes. They changed the student stuff, which was of course abused. I mean, that's just to a point, to a point of just laughable. Not only was it predictable and predicted by very sensible labor market economists who at the time testified that this was a bad idea. But then it went on, and then once it became obvious, they still didn't course correct, because anybody who complains about immigration is by default racist, which is of course absurd. They changed the temporary foreign worker program, which of course was abused. Temporary foreign workers are important in certain key sectors. Extremely highly educated people should be brought here with reckless abandon. Low-skilled, low-wage immigrants basically should not be allowed unless it's a highly specified industry like agriculture. So they blew that up. I mean, it just, like, that immigration piece, the knock-on effects of that immigration piece is that it disenfranchises young people who are often working low-skilled, low-wage jobs, and it disenfranchises the incumbent working-class people who are then displaced by people who are even more desperate than they are for these jobs. It disincentivizes corporations from investing in capital expenditures, which, because you just have a labor substitutability problem, which is like, if you're Tim Hortons, you either invest in better processes or you could hire cheap wage earners, and guess which one they're going to do. It's, and there's knock-on effects to productivity. So that's that piece. And then the third piece is the easy monetary policy, which, started out as a good idea, and then we became addicted to, and then was basically the rocket fuel that Canada, which already had a speculative and bubbly real estate market, took that to the stratosphere. Keeping real interest rates below inflation for almost 12 years, starting with our dear Lord and Savior, Mark Carney, and then perpetuated by Mark Carney, but started under a different regime, and then continuated by another regime. That was a disaster. I've gone on record on and on and on about saying, keeping interest rates really, really low is basically transfer of wealth from working people to capital owners. And again, this incentivizes investment in more productive assets. Sorry, real estate's not a productive asset, but you know what I'm saying? And so those are the things that we are now dealing with. And the current regime, has been brought to heel in certain respects. And so that's a good thing. We have to praise them for finally, after doing the right thing on immigration, finally, I think, doing the right thing on mining, after disastrous policies changing, whether it's emission stuff or not allowing for pipelines, all that stuff affects mining. The Impact Assessment Act was changed, which again disincentivize the opening of mines. It's difficult to do that anyways in Canada. So that's one thing. And then that's another way that they've been brought to heel. But yeah, so I mean, the long answer to your very difficult question is we're working through basically 10, 12 years. And and I have to admit, in some cases, these problems were already there. But, 12 years is 10, 12 years is a long time, 11 years, I guess, is a long time where you have multiple cycles, you have multiple different governments, but the philosophy always stayed the same. And so that is the problem we're dealing with. We're dealing with people who are holding on desperately for power and what is ultimately a very obviously broken philosophy about how Canada needs to be run for the betterment of working class people.
This episode of the Tom Storey Show is brought to you by Realty Ninja. Real estate agents, your clients should be proud of your website if you're going to feature their home on it. It's not 2005 and it's time to up your game. You need to have a website that is mobile friendly, that has SEO optimization, that people really want to actually go to and learn more about you. And that's where Realty Ninja comes in. They've built websites for thousands of real estate agents in Canada. We know a ton of people that have listened to the show have created their websites with Realty Ninja and they love it. And the best part, viewers and listeners of this show get 20% off your first year. So go to realtyninja.com/Tom to learn more. That's realtyninja.com/Tom. And oh, guess what? You don't pay until you launch your website. Go check them out because they're awesome. And now back to the podcast.
Productivity, I know, is your favorite word. Here's kind of how I think about it. If I'm listening to this show and I'm a 25-year-old Canadian and I'm thinking like, all right, I've heard Rich on the Loonie Hour talk about productivity, how it's just not there. Canada's not stacking up with other countries. What industry do I go into to make a difference that gets Canada on the right track? Is it a single person listening to this and going, okay, I'm going to go do something that's productive? Or is it just the way in which Canada, how everything you just explained, took us to a point that we went into industries? And you think about actually all the very, very smart people that are in real estate or employed by real estate that could be doing other things, but because real estate was where wealth building happened for those 10 to 12 years. Basically, what do we need to do as a country to actually get that productivity up?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it just starts with capital investment. We need to allocate capital to different industries other than building houses, and to a very real extent, that has already shifted. There has been a change in the zeitgeist in Canada, where whether it's and the way that you can calculate that is you look at when they break down gross fixed capital formation, which is the fancy way of saying investment or capex. There's different categories. There's intellectual property products, which is software and research. There's machinery and equipment, which includes everything from, like literally a Komatsu digger to boats and other capital goods that are used. And there's obviously non-residential structures. There's other equipment that's really important. And so fundamentally, we need to reorient ourselves and Canada into investing into those parts of the ledger rather than residential investment. Now, I'm not saying residential investment is not important. Of course it is. We need people, need places to live, etc. But fundamentally, the shift or the share got blown out. And it happened, by the way, and it's not the first time we've seen things like this happen. It happened in the US, in Ireland, in Spain, and other countries that have dealt with housing bubbles where enterprising young men and women go, okay, am I going to invest in building a factory or, equipment and machinery, or am I going to just plunk down play a leverage game, basically? And so, show me an incentive and I'll show you a result. So I don't blame those people necessarily, but I do blame the policymakers who I think should have seen this coming miles away. If I saw it, and there was loads of other people who did at the same time too. I'm not some kind of genius, but who just, they just didn't want to burst people's bubble. And so, sorry for the pun, but so back to your question about the individual, I think what Canada needs to do, so productivity is like labor force productivity, and that comes from educating your workforce. So we do that pretty well in Canada. It's having, I think, hard workers. There's absolutely a cultural element to labor force productivity. People don't like to say that, but there 100% is. So also have to have the right labor mix. So educating people in the right things, like all these basket weaving degrees are clearly not as productive as somebody who does a chemical engineering degree or becomes a doctor. And then the key thing that we've missed out on is related to the first thing I was mentioning, which is you need to invest in equipment to make those people more productive. For example, a computer or calculator will make an accountant much more productive than if he has an abacus. I like to chop wood and spend time in the forest. I thought I could chop my entire pile of logs with an axe. It took me, I realized that I'm old and fragile, and so I had to stop, and I rented myself a wood splitter. And for $100, I split more wood in 4 hours than I had chopped in 25 hours. And that's obviously very kind of silly, anecdote, but I think it explains to you the real issue we have in Canada with respect to productivity.
What tool are we missing as a country? Like, that's the tool that saved you the time that made you more productive. What tool do we need as a country?
I would say across the board, we need one thing. Let's talk about something that we have done and have invested. Let's talk about the positive. So if you look at intellectual property products, which is which is like, for example, software, we've spent a lot of money on software. So that's a good thing. One thing, but then there's a bunch of other stuff that we're doing badly. And I don't think there's one tool. I think it's just across the board. We need to incentivize spending more money on CapEx. So one thing that we're really horrible at right now in Canada is research and development. So research and development spending comes from two places, public and private. The combination, so both public and private are not spending enough money on research and development. And why research and development is really important is because you improve your processes. You not only improve a company's internal processes, but every now and again you spit out a BlackBerry and then you generate lots of wealth and then further investment and further jobs and further wealth and all the tax money and dollars that comes from that further wealth that's created by the public sector. The private sector. The public sector also plays a massive role in research and development. A stupid example again is like NASA. It's not just about sending people to the moon. It's like all of the tangential creations and innovations, whether it's in chemicals or material science or in computing or whatever, that sort of fall off that initial investment or idea. If you look at both research and development spending as a percentage of GDP in the private and public sector, public is back to 20-year low. Private's basically been anemic, it's been flat. Taken together, they're 25-year lows relative to GDP. That's a disaster. So it's not just one tool. It's just, and then machine, plant, and equipment. Like Canada doesn't manufacture anything anymore, and this idea that we're going to just become a totally service-based economy is, I think, extremely misguided. I've changed my view on this. Had you asked me 25 years ago, I would have said manufacturing is not that important. I think I was wrong about that. I think it's much more important for a number of reasons. One, it's obviously you want a country that's more resilient to outside shocks, and one way that you can do that is obviously manufacture more stuff. Also, I think it's also there's the productivity element. There's so much productivity that comes out of manufacturing. I don't mean manufacturing like making like toaster ovens. There's a whole range of manufacturing that people can do, whether it's medical equipment science, to semiconductors. God bless us, EV manufacturing, which I think is a total farce, but there are obviously tangible, sort of like tangential benefits to that, to chemical engineering, which is considered manufacturing. Refining oil is something that I think Canada should do way more of because of all the benefits, and you can make the case that that's also manufacturing. There's also processing of, for example, rare earths and critical minerals or materials. I always screw that up. Anyway, but you know what I mean? Like that, the processing of that and the manufacturing of those things are hugely beneficial, besides the fact that China controls 90% of that market. And obviously that's bad when we go to war with them. But you know what I mean? That's obviously a risk. But then there's all these like offshoots that we have from, anyways, I can go on and on and on. But the point is it's really just across the board that Canada needs to be focused on directing capital into those areas and industries.
But don't you think I view that as not going to happen. We talked about this 2 weeks ago, I want to say, Tom, like you can say you want to be productive as possible, but the incentives are wrong. So a couple of weeks ago, we were discussing why so many people were speculating on real estate. And personally, I think it's because it's the best, most tax efficient way to try and get ahead with as little effort as possible because of things like, say, for instance, I wanted to pull money out of my corporation right now and use it for my own personal whatever. I want to spend money. I want to do anything. I pull it out. I pay 52%, right, on money that I may have paid tax on last year at 15 or 10%, whatever the corporate tax rate is. So I pull that out and I want to do something with it. And I want to start a business that's doomed to fail because I can't afford the rent for the storefront, or I can't, even if I do make a profit, that's going to be taxed at whatever percentage, right? So there's no incentive. So my thought is, unless you get taxes down, you will have zero investment from companies, from individuals. There's just no point in doing any of it, rather than maybe I'll stick my money in this real estate, which is what people were doing. And then they thankfully have a bit of a capital gains only, 50% inclusion. So it ends up being about 21, 22% tax if you make a profit on it. So that's why everybody was doing it. And I just don't see anybody switching to, Canadian companies for investing when they have all these American companies that are profitable. And, there's just as much speculation as far as I'm concerned in Google and NVIDIA and Tesla and everything else right now. I mean, the S&P, as far as I'm concerned, is all speculation for the most part.
I disagree with you there.
Right.
The earnings are super strong and the margins are climbing precipitously. But anyway.
But I think the fact that I don't think maybe most of the S&P is.
But keep going. You're making a good point. You got lost in the weeds.
Yeah. There's no. Yeah. So there's just people are going to look for a benefit to what they do, and the benefit to doing anything in this country is diminished substantially. And apparently we're told, well, that's because we haven't spent enough, so we have to spend more, so it can diminish even more, and we can tax you even more. Like I'm in BC, so I don't know if the NDP has caught on yet, but they just announced a bigger deficit than when Trudeau started federally here. And now they're like, well, it's because, we've eliminated the carbon tax and the property transfer, right, is a quarter of what it was a few years ago, right? Like they're not getting, because they've wrung out the rag of taxes as much as they have, and they don't have another bucket to put it in to get more water out, right? And that's the situation we're in. Like I'm super frustrated right now with the BC deficit because they're like, oh, well, there was $2 billion that were supposed to come out of the carbon tax. It's like, well, wait, wasn't the carbon tax money supposed to go to making our world a little bit nicer place to live? Or are you telling me you were just feeding government coffers with that so you could hire even more people? Like, I think it was 2023. It was 5 out of every 6 employees hired in British Columbia were hired by the government. Like, it's crazy things, right? Like, what's the line, Tom? I pulled up every once in a while. Is it Winston Churchill? A man trying to, was it a nation? A nation trying to lift themselves up with taxation is like a man trying to pick up a bucket while he's standing in it.
That's right? A great quote, and I agree.
Yeah. So, like, do you think that we stand a chance to find a way to?
Sorry, I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
No, okay.
I was just saying no. Sorry, I was jumping at the bit. I was like, no, not with this regime. Not with this regime. And like, people always give me shit because I'm just like, pumping. I'm like paddling for one team, and eventually the next government will screw this up too. But we just need to change direction. And so, like, I reserve the right to then call the other team idiots when they inevitably screw things up. But right now, firstly, like, there's so many. I have like a chart that I haven't published on Twitter, so you guys are getting a sort of advanced thing. I've been working on it for weeks now. And the chart title is called basically the government economic footprint. And the chart, now if I can just drag it out, I lost it now. Oh, well, too bad. But I can do it off the top of my head. So, it's called the government economic footprint. And the way, I think about things like public sector employment is at a 30-year high, 21.7%. And if you look at public administration, which is a subset of public sector, it's also at a 30-year high at 6 or 7%. I can't forget the number. If you look at federal taxes as a percentage of GDP, 25-year high, 30%. If you look at total taxes as a percent of GDP, it's 33 or whatever percent. Again, it's 25 or 30-year high, I can't remember. If you look at total government consumption as a percentage of GDP, it's ex-COVID, because obviously it spiked during COVID. It's at a 20-year high. If you look at government spending of CapEx ex-COVID, you have a 20-year high. So fundamentally, there needs to be a philosophical and structural change in the way we think that we're going to solve these problems. And more of the same cannot be the answer. It can't. What is the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and thinking that you have that something's going to change. And so, we need to change our view on how we're going to solve these problems. But you raised such an important point, which is the incentive structure in Canada is completely wrong.
Buying a home is a big deal, so don't let your home inspection cause you more stress. For over 45 years, Karrasch and Dunlop has helped buyers across Canada understand the homes that they are buying with detailed, calm, clear, client-first inspections. Karrasch and Dunlop inspectors don't just point out problems, they explain what really matters in a way that will protect you in your home purchase. If you want confidence in your home inspection, top agents and home buyers trust Karrasch and Dunlop. So to check out where they service and to book your inspection, go to karrashanddunlop.com right now.
And I think you're right. I think if you're young, if you were 5 years ago, but let's say before COVID, if someone said to a young person, are you going to start a business to solve a problem, or are you just going to buy and sell real estate? And the young person would inevitably be, well, there's no incentive to build a corporation to solve a problem, which is what, in my view, is the real beauty of capitalism. Because you improve productivity, you raise wages, you lift the living standard of everyone around you. Whereas real estate investment ultimately can be a speculative game. Now, of course, it can be good, in certain cases. No one will ever dispute that. But in Canada, it was already at a speculative fervor. And so you're right, we need to lower taxes. We just do. We need to disincentivize bad investment and incentivize good investment and allow people to feel like they can build something and contribute. And I agree with everything that you sort of said and laid out there. Oh, sorry. Where I disagree with you is I think there is opportunity for change. I mean, you don't seem that optimistic. I think there is an opportunity for change.
I'm very optimistic always.
It didn't sound like it.
Well, I just don't see, ever being lower taxation being a thing. So, what we're going to do, we're going to vote in the other guys and they're going to drop our taxes from 52% to 51%. And we're all supposed to love them, right? Like, I don't think that's realistic.
So you make a very fair point that who knows what I don't think that the other guys will be like exponentially better. I just think they'll stop driving us into the ocean and turn around. I just but what I do think that we can do is things like we can cut federal corporate taxes. That would be a relatively straightforward one. One thing I should probably write this down actually, so I don't forget. I don't even think that corporate taxes actually generate that much revenue in Canada. So we should probably
less now.
Yeah, and even less now. And so if we could just cut corporate taxes, that would be easy. Provinces can do whatever they want, but you could cut the corporate statutory rate. You could let or incentivize. One of the things that the blue guys say, which is if you don't have to pay capital gains if you're reinvesting in Canada. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah,
So we'll see.
It would make a ton of sense. Can I ask you again, because I prefaced this earlier we're only stupid real estate people. We don't understand a lot of the markets and that
probably
sort of thing.
Way richer than I am. So who's the stupid one?
But okay, so you say that you don't necessarily think of the S&P or even just the big. Let's what do they call it? The Magnificent Seven or whatever they have now as maybe not being speculative. Can you tell me then why? And this is an honest question. So if a stock that I buy in that sense, like an NVIDIA, Google, whatever, is paying me between 0 and 1% of a dividend, if that, and my way of making money on buying that stock is speculating that the cost of that will increase in the future so I can sell it to a bigger sucker, which is exactly what we did with real estate. How is that not speculation?
Well, I mean, one is always speculating to the future, right? You are taking a bet on anything. So anytime you make any kind of investment, you are betting. So let's just get that out of the way. My point is that you can have price earnings compression. So you have price and you have earnings. And so, if you pay for something that has a PE ratio of 20 and its earnings rise rapidly, and then its PE ratio goes to 15, your company is now, you've made money, you've compressed your price earnings ratio, and in theory, you've made money. I mean, but there's loads of reasons you want to own stock. You want to own stock some people never ever sell their stock, right? You can, and so I have clients who bought bank stocks 25 years ago and will literally never sell them. But the value has gone up significantly. And the reason that value has gone up is because these companies, when they mature, they might start to pay dividends. So, for example, there's loads of examples in the U.S. where companies at first never paid any dividend. Then the industry that they're in matures, and then they start to give back cash. That's happened. There's obviously there's a price earnings compression. So that's like there's the change in the equity risk premium relative to how much you price. I mean, and then also there's reasons that you might want to own stocks because of the debasement of your currency. It's a real value. It's a real asset, is what I meant to say. Sorry. It's a real asset. And so in a world where budget deficits are going to infinity, no one has any appetite for austerity or doing anything remotely close to sensible fiscal policy. You have central banks who are allowing that to happen because they're no longer independent. You have basically a debasement of currency. And what's one way of protecting your purchasing power is by owning a claim on an asset, which is what a stock is, that is priced in real dollars. So yes, of course, there's speculation in equity markets, just like there's speculation in every market. But to say that there's outright, it's just pure, unadulterated speculation, I think is wrong. I mean, if you look at the earnings of these few tech companies have just gone from strength to strength to strength. I mean, these companies are generating incredible amounts of cash flow, and their margins are starting to rise. If it was the opposite, so and that's really important distinction between the bubble the internet bubble we saw in 2000 versus the internet bubble. Well, I wouldn't call it a bubble necessarily. I think right now we're dealing with an everything bubble.
Yeah.
So, but just specifically the tech companies, if you look at the margins, the debt, the earnings growth of the companies in 2000 versus the margins, the debt, the earnings growth of the companies now, these are just not. They're not. It's not comparable. You can't compare pets.com with Nvidia.
Yeah.
And so I think that's you raise an extremely good point, and I think it's one that's worth challenging, and you have to have the discussion. But I think it's unfair to say that it's just speculation, if that makes any sense.
Rich, to go a little further, okay, hang on, Tom. Yeah, I got one more. I wrote these down.
Next. Yeah.
I just want to also understand. So I understand we hear this all the time. Real estate is not productive. Real estate is not productive. And for sure, land pimps like Tom and I who flip resale houses for people and help them move on. It's not a new one. That's one of the oldest ones.
Is it?
Yeah. But realistically, like, we help people make their moves in life and all that stuff. And sure, is that productive? Not by the definitions at all. But for sure, construction is. Right? So for sure, construction and development of new properties is. So is that like a distinction we need to make? Like,
absolutely. I think, when I say that it's not productive, I'm being glib and provocative, mostly because Steve on the channel is a real estate agent. Mm-hmm. And all the barbs usually go my way and they never go his way. I think what I mean to say, and you're right to challenge me on that, and so I'm sorry for all your listeners that love real estate. What I mean is there is, it's all, the dose makes the poison. Yeah. And I think that, in a world where literally no one has anywhere to live, if you build a hut then yes, that's extremely productive. You are warm, you are out of the rain, you can keep your tools dry, you can have a place to have more children, which is or a school, or you know what I mean? Like, I'm sorry, I'm using extreme examples, but of course, real estate, to say that it's not productive is wrong. Full stop. The problem is when you get into situations where it pulls away capital investment from under other industries. Or there's outright speculation. And the way we can define that is like ownership transfer cost is like one of the line items in GDP. In that, and you can see that literally just went through the moon. So an ownership transfer cost is not investment in inverted commas. It is literally an ownership transfer cost. You have no material left over. So that's where people like economists like me get a little annoyed that everybody's like obsessed with building real estate because we say it's not productive. Here's another example. Those ghost cities in China. This is an extreme example, but I think people will understand. They literally built cities that nobody lives in. They're literally called ghost cities. So you have entire cities that have not literally nobody in there, but very, very few, very, very, very low occupation rates, where instead of spending money on that, they could have built literally anything else, and it may or may not have been more productive. Is that more? It's a fair, I think, assessment. So I apologize for calling real estate unproductive. No.
I honestly just want to have, like, I 100% agree with you. There's like the fact that it went to 80% of investment, 90% of investment in the country was going into real estate is insane. You can't have that. But I like to clarify these things because
you're right to challenge me on. You're 100% right to challenge me on that, and I should be more thoughtful.
No, you shouldn't.
Fun of Steve.
You shouldn't. By the way, you said that our real estate audience loves real estate. I'm going to let you know 95% of our audience hates real estate. So
they want it to go down. I don't think they hate it. They just want it to decrease in value.
I think no, but I'm happy you challenged me on that because besides you being right, and that's just a fact. I just think
I'll have my wife listen to this part. Then my wife is going to listen to this part for sure.
It's just listen, it's like there's too much of a good thing. You can't have all of your money plunked into 4 great forwards who can't back check and don't hit. It's good to have one good forward who can't back check and doesn't hit. It's maybe good to have 2 forwards that score a lot of goals but are super soft and don't show up in the playoffs. But you need to sprinkle that investment, across your economy is what I'm trying to say.
Very well done. Thank you for saying that. I want to go back for a second. You had made the analogy of we're driving the bus into the ocean, but as a country, not that long ago, we had a chance to stop the bus or at least start backing it up, but we got distracted by the sun. It hit us in the eyes, or at least something orange kind of got in our faces. So what I want to know is, you guys recently had the opportunity to interview Pierre Poilievre, and you going into that interview versus the end of the interview, did you feel different after speaking with him on the Loonie Hour about him being the guy that's going to make all the change, or being the head of the change that we've talked about so much in this episode?
So, like, at the risk of alienating all of my Conservative Party friends, to be honest with you, like, I just think in general, do I think that he's the man for the job? I mean, frankly, he's our only choice. And so I think that's so we need to rally behind that person. Now, that's not exactly a ringing endorsement, so let me be more specific. I think he's somebody who understands the data, and I think he understands the real actual issues at the heart of what ails Canada. And for me, as a wonk, as a nerd, who's all I do is obsess over data, to me that is extremely comforting, because you have to first identify the problem accurately before you can even attempt to fix the problem. And I think that he and his team understand the problem. I've spoken to some of them repeatedly. I've done some work for them, full disclosure. And I think they get it, or they're ignoring everything that I've said to them, which is also possible, but I don't think but just all jokes aside, like, they understand the problem. And so for me, after speaking to him during the on-tape interview I was less enthralled. All the off-the-record stuff to me was extremely encouraging, if that makes any sense. Because I think what we often forget is that there's two sides to every politician. And maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, but I think every adult listening to this understands there's like the messaging that they have to do in order to get people on side. Mm-hmm. And then there's the real person who's behind the scenes having difficult discussions. And that to me is the person so the messaging I think can be a bit stale, because if you've been listening to him for a long time, he hasn't really changed and he's extremely on brand and on message. And I credit him for doing that. I think that's very difficult. I think behind the scenes, I think he's much more funny. He's more liberated. I think he's sharper and he might swear a time or two, God forbid. And I think he's extremely clear on what needs to happen, which is we need to exploit our natural resources, lower taxes, get the government out of the way. And that part, was very encouraging. Is that a fair answer? I don't know how to answer that.
The public safety minister would totally disagree with you right now about having two sides to every argument.
That's what's so crazy is like that is to me like what infuriates me about what's going on now. Like he was honest. He was honest about what is objectively a stupid policy. And instead of like in a weird fucked up way, instead of just giving the guy credit and being like, thank you for being honest, we now we forgive you and we'll just move on. Like, we're not going to do the buyback. We're going to do something else. And instead of that, they're just doubling down on that. And it's just like, and so where I think that the blue guys are genuine is I think they believe, if you heard them behind the scenes, I think they genuinely believe that there's way too much government, there's way too much red tape, that we need to unlock our oil and gas sector. We need to make mining easier. We need to process those minerals in Canada. We need to make manufacturing more appealing to address Steve's concerns about building new industries, et cetera, et cetera. And that's where I think at the very minimum, I think he's much more authentic, if that makes any sense, in his beliefs. Like Mark Carney wrote a book about how he wanted to destroy the oil and gas industry. He wrote a book about it. It wasn't that long. And now he wants to make Canada an energy fucking superpower, but we're not going to, but I'm like, that's bananas. I mean, so the authenticity is really important to me. And I think that that's one thing at least they have going for them.
I think that's what the Conservatives are kind of missing now, because they're trying to play that game of not being authentic. Like I've said it here before, like, Pierre, put the glasses back on, nerd it out a little, say the stuff you were saying before. Like his was a couple years ago, maybe a year ago, his interview with Jordan Peterson was just like, if every Canadian got to hear that interview or sat down for the whole hour and heard it, they would be like, oh yeah, what he's saying makes sense. But they don't hear that, right? They hear the CBC saying, oh, he's just like Trump, and then it's over. So that's a tough fight. I don't want to, I know we don't have you for too much longer, and Tom's been holding his breath on a couple of questions, I think.
Well, I want to know, you said you went out of your element recently and you actually made a video on your YouTube channel about real estate. So what did you talk about in it from your perspective, from how you see things, your bird's eye view? What did you talk about in that video? And can that translate to someone listening to this that's thinking about buying or selling a home in Canada in the next 90 days?
Sure. Oh boy. I mean, so for the first thing, the way I laid out my video is I always like to provide context. So like how we got where we got to. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing I talked about is, frankly, there's been a quote unquote crash, but we're only so at the headline price index level, we're only back to like 2021 levels, which is bananas, right? So the way you assess that is like you basically take every peak. So 1989, 2008, February 2022, I can't remember the other one. And you just say, okay, how much have we fallen from the peak? And it's like, so it's been about 18 or 19 or 20%, whatever, let's just say, from the peak. But if you look at the chart over time, we're actually only back to 2021 levels, and house prices were not affordable, relative to some metrics, rent, income in 2021.
For home insurance of any type, I use Square One. Go to squareone.ca/the Tom Storey Show to buy your tenant, landlord, or homeowner insurance policy and save $20. That's squareone.ca/the Tom Storey Show and save $20.
So that's one angle that I took. The other thing that I think is really important, and something that I've had to really learn, I mean, I thought I knew it, but now it's really coming clear, is that housing is not some just like homogenous blob. And I think people like me always make that mistake because, frankly, it's just easier. You see the housing price chart for Canada and you're like, it's going up, it's going down, whatever. But housing, I know this is going to sound dumb to you guys, but for me, it was, I think, an insight, which is housing is extremely local. And so depending on where you live, obviously there might be massive changes in housing and house prices. And so, in Quebec City, house prices have been going up. In Montreal, they've been relatively flat for the last 2 years. In Windsor and, Brampton or whatever it is, they've cratered. And so I think that heterogeneity is like something that I need to constantly remind myself, like, it's easy. And then, so that's that one piece. And the other thing that's also really important is like, not only from that perspective, but also where the pain is. And so like Montreal hasn't had the condo boom, the dog crate condo boom, or that, let's say, Toronto has. And so, any risks that you may or may not have with respect to real estate investment trusts or private credit lending facilities or whatever that are exposed to Toronto might be hemorrhaging cash. But the ones that are focused on Vancouver or Calgary, well, may or may not be doing well or not. And then the other thing I would just say is that, I think that the last piece on the video is I think there's just more pain to come in some of these pinch points, just purely when you look at inventory levels versus the sales.
The one thing that I've been thinking about recently is we talk so much about how the prices have come down, but it's not just that the prices came down, but the interest rate stayed at 2%. So obviously there's a certain percentage of people, mostly downsizers, but they're just taking equity from the growth they saw in their house to buy anyways, cash, right? So if you actually look at, and I did this just for Toronto and just to show people like prices come down, but it's all dependent on interest rates. And I know it's only the 5 years here that you're locked into it, but just to give you some numbers I thought were interesting. So I did benchmark price for City of Toronto, and the lowest discounted 5-year fixed rate at the time based on a 20% down payment and a 25-year amortization. July 2005, your monthly payments would have been $1,500. July 2010, $1,800. July 2015, $2,200. July 2020, $2,900. July 2025, $4,049 per month. So it's like prices have obviously dropped. There's no, like, we're all on the same page here. I don't know if the actual cost of owning real estate on a monthly basis, if you need a mortgage, like, yes, your down payment's less, your land transfer would be less, and buying at a lower price is always better. I'm very clear on that. But the cost of owning it seems to be not that much different, even with prices changing and going up and down because of the interest rates.
I think you make an excellent point. I think that what you're describing is the yield curve in a way. Right. So for people who may not understand, the yield curve is the fancy, obnoxious economist way of talking about different interest rates for different maturities. Mm-hmm. And so at the front end of the curve is what we call it, short end of the curve. You have the shortest possible is the overnight target rate that's determined by the Bank of Canada. And the longest, I mean, in theory, I guess you could have a 100-year bond like Austria, but in practice, it's really, let's say, 10 years for argument's sake. You can have 20-year bonds, but whatever. The U.S. mortgage rate's priced off the 30-year bond. Let's say in Canada, it's overnight to 10 years. And what we've seen is that the 5-year mortgage rate has actually the 5-year government bond yield has basically not changed in a year, even though we've had, 200 basis points, or 150 odd basis points of cuts at the front end of the curve. And so that's what I think is really interesting. I mean, everybody, and that's what I talk about in my video, actually, I show the chart, and you can actually see, like, everybody's clamoring for more rate cuts. But the rate cuts that they do is only the front end of the curve. And so if you, for example, have higher inflation going forward, if the government of Canada does a big, beautiful budget deficit and explodes the issuance of debt at the 5-year or 4-year end of the curve, you have a situation where the yields actually might rise, even though the Bank of Canada is cutting. and it refers back to your point where it's expensive and costly to run your house or service your debt. And so that's the rub. It's like you need prices to continue to fall, and rate cuts are not the panacea that everybody thinks they are.
We didn't even get to the bond yields and how that might be. That was actually one of my questions, but I know we're not going to get there.
Go for it.
I wanted to.
No, we've got another 10 minutes.
Okay, if you got a little time, because I also want you guys got a live event I think coming up too. So I don't know if you want to plug that.
Oh yeah, plug away.
But actually, believe it or not, I'm there to support. I'm actually going to be randomly downtown that night, so
cool.
I bought a couple of tickets. I hope to come. I don't know if I'm going to make it, but I'm supporting you guys with the tickets. So we'll hopefully I'll get there. So explain how rates could be coming down, but the bond yield could smash real estate even further, or however that might work.
Yeah. So the yield curve, again, which is just a fancy way of saying different rates at different maturities, is composed of different pieces, let's say. The front end of the curve, let's just say for argument's sake, this is very simplified, but just say for argument's sake, is 100% of the interest rates set by the Bank of Canada. But as you go further out the curve, as we say, you have different components that you add on top of this layered cake. One of the components is growth. So if you have lots of growth, as you go out the yield curve, your interest rates will go higher. You have an inflation premium, because let's assume that inflation is relatively stable. If you're obviously lending to the government, you want to be compensated in real terms. If inflation is 10%, you're not going to lend to government at 2%. You'll be losing money. So you need some kind of compensation for inflation. There's a term premium involved in that, which is related to growth, but is slightly different. Which is the further, let's say if I lend you $5 for tonight to buy you a beer, but if I lend you $5 and you're only going to pay me in 10 years, well, who knows what mansion you might be living in 10 years, and you might not let me in, and I might not see the money. That's called a term premium, right? There's the time value of money. Then there's a credit component, which is not as important for government, because in theory they're risk-free assets, but there is always some element of credit quality and the spread, right? Another layer on the cake that you pay for and obviously the credit component is related to the term premium and the time quote component, but not fully. Anyway, so let's just stick to those 3 or 4, whatever. But that's why. And so you have a situation where the credit, and the further out the curve it gets more and more complicated naturally. And so that's why you've literally seen the 5-year government bond yield just has not moved in the last year. And even though you've had massive amounts of cuts in the front end of the curve. And the reason, in my view, that the 5-year and the 10-year going out hasn't moved is because the market is worried about inflation. The market is worried about the sustainability of the government's fiscal path. The market's worried about a bunch of other things. It's also related to what's going on in other yield curves and other markets. Canadians like to, in my view, Canadians don't spend enough time thinking about Canada. Well, neither does the Canadian bond yield. Like the Canadian bond yield is in effect attached to the hip to the US Treasury market. And so that's another part. So what's going on in America is very much the same as what's going on in Canada, which is higher inflation for longer, massive budget deficits. And so if the US bond yield goes up, Canada's will be dragged along with it. So that's why there's all these different things, and that affects the mortgage market. So on top of your bond yield, banks will say, okay, you're a good, you're a good credit, Steve. I'm going to only charge you 25 basis points over the risk-free rate. Tom, you're slightly worse, so I'm going to charge you 25 basis points on the risk-free rate. I'm simplifying things, but ultimately that's what banks do. They may not do it at an individual level, but they sure as hell do it on a loan book level. That is how they think about these things. What spreads are you willing to offer what clients at what time? I think I did an okay job answering that question.
I got to send both of you guys, because you said not a lot of people are thinking about Canada first. I saw this thing this morning. It was a 1990 interview with Don Cherry. And I thought he was talking about like Swedish and Russian hockey players, but he was just talking about Canada. It had nothing to do with hockey. You guys would love it. Like everything he said is like, if you had gone back to 2024 and replayed it and not told someone that was from 1990, you would have no idea it was a different time. And you're just like, I'm a nationalist. I'm Canada first. And this is how I think about things. And then eventually that's what got him kicked off the air. Anyways.
The more things change, Tom, the more they stay the same, man. Yeah, that's what we call that. If you send it to me, I'll put it on here and hopefully it won't take all of our AdSense money for the week. We should wrap because I got to go too, guys. And I know Richard does too.
Rich, final question. For your YouTube channel, what do people type into YouTube to go find your videos?
Oh, if you just type in IceCap asset management, it should be the first thing that comes up. Just give me
ASCAP.
no, IceCap.
That's my channel.
Yeah. The other thing I would love if you guys just give me a Twitter follow if you're interested. I just tried my best to. Although I did make a mistake yesterday or a couple of days ago in one of my charts, but my batting average is very, very, very high, and it is sort of like an insight or a window into what I'm thinking about with respect to the Canadian economy on that day. So I'll pump out charts on inflation, employment, exports, capital investment, real estate, GDP, whatever it is. Just give me a follow on Twitter. You can Richard Diaz CFA I forgot. Richard Diaz _CFA.
And
there's lots of impersonators, which is very annoying.
Never
me and Steve never really got on Twitter.
Really? I'm negative enough. I'm negative enough already. Oh, it's a terrible place. It's the worst place in the world.
I love it.
Okay, I just want to lastly, so I think it's October, what is it? October 21st you're going to be in town?
Yeah, October 21st in Vancouver. Yeah, I mean, the ticket gets you a little bit of food and some beers. It's not really a moneymaker. It's really just to meet people and to build the brand and to meet, just to build the community of people who are, I think, appropriately concerned about the direction of our country. And Dan Foch and
Nick
I'm
Hill.
the worst salesman ever. Guy.
It's Nick Hill. We've had them both on the show.
Nick Hill. That's right. Yeah. Sorry, he's lovely. Also, sorry.
Would you call this event productive for the Canadian economy?
Unclear.
Can you tell me? You guys have done these in the past. Can you tell me?
They're great. They're super well attended. People love them. People took selfies with me, which I always find a bit weird.
Right. I'll come find you for my selfie so I can send it to my wife.
It's fun. I mean,
I can be and like, I know that guy.
Yeah, what's also really fun is people like it's about like-minded individuals. All different stripes of people and polka dots and the funny shaped people come out and have fun. And like the Loonie Hour, we take our jobs very seriously. We don't take ourselves too seriously. So I think that's the nice balance, nice mix that we have.
Well, you guys have done an amazing job. Congrats, by the way, on what you've done with that podcast.
Cheers. Thank you.
Because you guys have done awesome. Thanks for coming on here today.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for watching, listening, and we will see you next week.